Good evening and welcome. Tonight we're diving deep into one of the most volatile regions on Earth, Israel and Gaza. After days of relentless violence, a ceasefire is in effect. It's a fragile peace, a pause but not a solution. Today we explore the multifaceted impact of this ceasefire between Israel and Hamas. From potential benefits to significant consequences, let's delve into what this means for the region and the world. We'll examine the potential for hostage releases, the flow of humanitarian aid, and the geopolitical implications, including the impact on American politics and the stability of global trade. But most importantly, we'll ask the hard questions: can this ceasefire hold? What are the chances it will actually lead to a lasting peace, and what are the risks if it fails? For families who have lived a nightmare, this ceasefire brings a flicker of hope. The hope that their loved ones, held captive, might finally be coming home. A ceasefire often creates the conditions for negotiations, a space where the release of hostages can be prioritized. It's a lifeline not just for those held against their will, but for their families, their communities living in agony, desperate for any sign of their safe return. Think of the pressure on governments, the public outcry, the moral imperative to bring innocent people home. A ceasefire can ease that pressure, allowing for calmer heads to prevail, for humanitarian organizations like the Red Cross to step in, to negotiate, to provide aid, to offer a glimmer of humanity in the midst of chaos. But it's a delicate dance. Trust is shattered, broken by violence. Every negotiation, every concession is fraught with risk. The world watches, waits, and prays for those held captive, their fate hanging in the balance. Make no mistake, a ceasefire is not peace. It's a pause button, a chance to catch your breath, to staunch the bleeding, but the wounds remain open. Yes, it allows humanitarian aid to flow into Gaza, to reach civilians trapped in the crossfire, those who have lost everything, their homes, their loved ones, their sense of safety. And yes, it stops the rockets and airstrikes, at least for now, preventing further bloodshed. It gives both sides a chance to regroup, to reassess, to hopefully reconsider their next move. But let's be clear, a ceasefire doesn't address the root causes of this conflict, the decades of mistrust, the territorial disputes, the political and ideological divides that run so deep. It's a bandage on a gaping wound, a temporary fix that, without a fundamental shift in the dynamics on the ground, could easily unravel. In the chaotic world of geopolitics, every crisis is an opportunity. And for some, this ceasefire is a chance to claim victory, to score political points. Former President Trump, never one to shy away from the spotlight, has already weighed in, suggesting he could have brokered a better deal, implying that this ceasefire is a win for Hamas, a loss for Israel, and by extension, a loss for America. It's a familiar playbook, one that resonates with his base, tapping into deep-seated beliefs about America's role in the world, about strength and weakness, about winners and losers. But this is a complex conflict, not a reality TV show. Reducing it to simplistic sound bites ignores the nuances, the intricacies of a decades-old struggle that defies easy answers. And yet, perception matters. Trump's pronouncements, however disconnected from reality, have the power to shape public opinion, to influence the political discourse, to potentially undermine any progress made towards a lasting peace. For months, the Red Sea, a vital artery of global commerce, has been a tinderbox. Attacks on ships, threats to shipping lanes have sent shockwaves through the international community. This ceasefire, if it holds, offers a glimmer of hope, a chance to de-escalate tensions, to reduce the risk of further attacks, to ensure the safe passage of goods and services through this critical maritime route. Think of the oil tankers, the container ships, carrying everything from electronics to food that traverse these waters every day. Their safe passage is vital to the global economy, to our interconnected world. A disruption, a blockage, could have devastating consequences, driving up prices, creating shortages, fueling instability far beyond the Middle East. So, yes, this ceasefire matters, not just for Israelis and Palestinians, but for the world. It's a reminder that in our globalized world, peace and stability are precious commodities, and their absence has far-reaching consequences. Let's be clear, a ceasefire is not a peace agreement. It's a pause, a cessation of hostilities, but it doesn't address the fundamental issues at the heart of this conflict. Without a genuine commitment to dialogue, to compromise, to addressing the legitimate grievances of both sides, this ceasefire risks becoming a temporary reprieve, a prelude to the next cycle of violence. Think of the territorial disputes, the status of Jerusalem, the right of return for Palestinian refugees, the security concerns of both Israelis and Palestinians. These are complex, deeply emotional issues with no easy solutions. Ignoring them, papering over them with a ceasefire is like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. It might stop the bleeding for now, but it won't heal the wound, and so, the world watches, waits, and hopes that this ceasefire is not just a temporary lull in the storm, but the first step, however tentative, towards a just and lasting peace. This ceasefire, while welcomed by many, has also raised red flags. Some fear it could give militant groups like Hamas breathing room, a chance to regroup, to rearm, to plan their next move. The concern is that this conflict already spilling over into the region could metastasize with fighters and weapons flowing into other volatile areas, further destabilizing an already fragile world. And then there's the threat to the West. Could this ceasefire embolden terrorist organizations, convince them that violence, that hostage-taking are effective tactics, undermining the very principles of democracy and the rule of law that we hold dear? These are not idle fears. We've seen this movie before. We know that terrorist groups thrive in chaos, that they exploit instability, that they are patient, calculating, and ruthless in their pursuit of their goals. The challenge for the West, for all of us who believe in a world governed by law, not by violence, is to remain vigilant, to support efforts to address the root causes of this conflict, and to never, ever, give in to terror. For decades, the two-state solution, the idea of an independent Palestinian state alongside Israel, has been the holy grail of peace negotiators, but this ceasefire without any tangible progress towards that goal has left many wondering if that vision is now hopelessly out of reach. By freezing the conflict without addressing the core demands of both sides, this ceasefire may actually harden positions, making a negotiated settlement even more elusive. Think of the Palestinian leadership, already weakened and divided. A ceasefire that delivers little beyond a respite from violence could further erode its credibility, making it even harder to sell any future compromises to its people. And on the Israeli side, there are those who will see this ceasefire as a vindication of their hardline stance, proof that concessions only embolden their enemies. So the question remains, can this ceasefire be a stepping stone to peace, or will it become another missed opportunity, another chapter in a seemingly endless cycle of violence and despair? For Palestinians, the dream of an independent state living side by side with Israel in peace and security has fueled their struggle for generations. But this ceasefire, without any meaningful progress towards that dream, has left many feeling that their aspirations have been sidelined, their sacrifices ignored. Without a clear roadmap to statehood, without a commitment from Israel and the international community to make that vision a reality, this ceasefire risks being seen as a defeat, a betrayal. Think of the young Palestinians growing up in refugee camps, yearning for a future, a homeland of their own. What message does this ceasefire send to them? What hope does it offer? The danger is that this sense of disillusionment, of hopelessness, will push more Palestinians into the arms of extremists, those who reject any compromise, any peaceful solution. And so, the clock is ticking. The window for a two-state solution is closing, and with it, the hope for a just and lasting peace. In the eyes of some, this ceasefire, brokered without any clear concessions from Hamas, feels like a defeat for the West, a victory for terrorism and extremism. The concern is that this will embolden other militant groups, not just in the Middle East, but around the world, sending a message that violence, that hostage-taking, are effective tactics for achieving political goals. Think of the implications for Western foreign policy, for our commitment to democracy and human rights. If we are seen as rewarding terrorists, what message does that send? And what about the future of negotiations, the prospects for peace? If violence is rewarded, why would any group lay down their arms? Why would they choose dialogue over destruction? These are uncomfortable questions, but we must ask them, because the stakes are too high, not just for Israel and the Palestinians, but for the future of our world. In conclusion, while a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas can offer immediate humanitarian relief, it also carries significant risks and consequences. This fragile truce is a double-edged sword, offering both a glimmer of hope and a stark reminder of the challenges ahead. The world is watching, waiting, and hoping that this ceasefire will hold, that it will pave the way for meaningful dialogue and a lasting resolution to this decades-old conflict. But we must also be clear-eyed about the risks, about the potential for this ceasefire to unravel, to further entrench existing divisions, and to embolden those who seek to exploit violence for their own ends. Understanding these dynamics, the potential benefits and the very real risks is crucial for shaping future policies and achieving lasting peace. The path forward is fraught with difficulty, but the pursuit of peace, however elusive, must remain our unwavering